mines, and even up until this present day. That's why America is taking NAFTA down to Mexico to pay the Mexican workers a minimum wage because they are hard workers. His name, Issachar, means he is hired. And the white man knows this prophecy. That's why he exploit and use the Mexicans as cheap labor.
Right, even here in the city, whenever the Japanese or the white man in general wants a cheap labor, who do they get? The Mexicans, and pay them less than minimum wage. Because they say none of the blacks surely ain't going to work for that, or none of the other Spanish-speaking tribes, but get the Mexicans. You could pay them $1.50 an hour. They'll do it.
Right.
Okay. So now, let's go to Deuteronomy 33.
18 and 19.
Right.
So we're doing Zebulun and Issachar because these two tribes are interrelated. They connect borders. Mexico runs all the way down, extends down to Guatemala and all the different El Salvador and so forth. All these were the families of the Aztecs and the Mayans, and they had close relationship.
Right. So Deuteronomy 33 verse 18. And of Zebulun he said, Rejoice, Zebulun, in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tent.
So Zebulun rejoiced in their going out when they used to keep the feast. Now, not talking about the wicked feast that they kept when they went off into wickedness. When they came here first, they were keeping the righteous sacrifices. But then they went off into wickedness, which is sacrificing the people on the altars and cutting the hearts out. I went off into mass wickedness. So it says, Rejoice, Zebulun, in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tents. Who was in the tents of Zebulun? The Aztecs. That's why they used to travel back and forth and used to exchange gifts. Right. They were close relatives.
Verse 19. They shall call the people unto the mountain. Right. The ones that did the calling was Issachar. During the Middle Ages, they were called the Aztecs. Because the verse above it says, Rejoice, Zebulun, in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tents. So it was Issachar that remained in their tents. The Aztecs, they would blow the horn at the feastly occasions and call the tribe of Zebulun up, which were the Mayans, and there they would do sacrifices. Okay, sacrifices of righteousness. So I'll read on. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness, for they shall suck of the abundance of the seas, and of treasures hid in the sand.
And when you look it up, the word Panama means the riches of the seas, the riches of the sea. So Panama is rich in the abundance of fish and all the riches that's in the sea. So he's telling you right here about Zebulun and Issachar too.
Right. In ancient times, they actually, before we came to this side of the world, the Aztecs and the Mayans, back in Jerusalem, they really had sacrifices of righteousness. Now, a lot of you know the history that when they came over here, the Spanish discovered them sacrificing human flesh. Okay, is that recorded in the Bible? Yes. Let's go to briefly Hosea chapter, I think it's 8 and 13. Hosea chapter 8 and 13.
Right. Hosea 8 and 13. Yes. They sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of my offerings.
Right. They sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of mine offerings. You heard about Montezuma the first, Montezuma the second. A lot of the great kings of the Aztecs and the Mayans, they were sacrificing flesh for the sacrifices of the Most High's offerings. They became wicked. The Bible bears witness to that. Read. Read it again.
They sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of my offerings, and eat it.
And eat it. So what kind of flesh was they sacrificing? Human flesh. Check out the history. They were sacrificing one another and ripping the hearts out of the chest and then eating it.
And giving it to the gods.
Right, and offering it to these strange gods that they were making up. Okay, Baal. Okay, read on.
But the Lord accepteth them not.
Right, because this was the time of prophecy that all things written should be fulfilled, that all vengeance would come down upon Israel. Read.
Now will he remember their iniquity and visit their sins.
Right, so the Lord said now he will remember their sins. He's going to visit them. In what form did the Lord visit them? In the form of the Spaniard conquistadors. When they came in 1492 and destroyed them from 1492 on. Read.
They shall return to Egypt.
They shall return to Egypt, meaning they shall return to captivity. Okay, so now, let's go back to, did we finish Deuteronomy 33?
33, and we're down to the, yes, we finished that. So I'd like to list that the Indians today that's living down in, from Guatemala to Panama, they're known as the Cunas, the Chukos and the San Blas Indians. Those are all descendants of the Mayan Indians today that's occupying from Guatemala to Panama.
Right. Let me go to this book briefly, entitled The Hope of Israel, written by Manasseh ben Israel. Okay, these were records that this so-called white man had scribed concerning the Indians that he came across. And by the word Indian comes from the Latin word India, which means servant. That's what it means. So I'm going to go to page 112. I shall speak somewhat in this discourse of the divers opinions which have been, and shall declare in what countries it is thought the 10 tribes are. I'm going to jump down. You must know, therefore, that Alexo Venagas says that the first colonies of the West Indies were of the Carthaginians, meaning Israelites. That's what it's making reference to. Who first of all inhabited Hispaniola, which is the Dominican Republic, and as they increased, spread to the island of Cuba. From thence to the continent of America, and after that towards Panama, New Spain, and Peru. Okay, so this guy is letting you know that the Israelites were spread in the Dominican Republic, Cuba, America, Panama, New Spain, meaning Mexico, and Peru.
And this will end the conclusion in Zebulun and Issachar, but this verse is mainly about Issachar. 1 Chronicles 12 and 32.
And of the children of Issachar.
And the children of Issachar, which are the Mexicans, known back then as the Aztecs. Read on.
Which were men that had understanding of the times.
Which were men that had understanding of the times. The times were what? To understand astronomy and astrology. Knowing the zodiac. Reading the heavens. Read on.
To know what Israel ought to do.
And they knew what Israel had to do at certain occasions.
The heads of them were 200, and all their brethren were at their commandment.
So all their brethren were at their command when they would foresee and read the heavens. So when you go back in the history, even the Aztecs had calendars, and they even foretold of futuristic prophecies that occur when you read the Codex and the history of the Aztecs on the writings on the pyramids. So this will end the conclusion of Zebulun and Issachar. Now we're going to Dan.
Right.
To the tribe of Dan.
Genesis 49 and 17. And by the way, the word Dan means judge. Okay? Verse 17 says, Dan shall be a serpent by the way.
So back in ancient time, when Dan was a judge, Dan was like a serpent to the enemies of the nation of Israel. Like a serpent in the way waiting to attack his enemies. Read on.
An adder in the path.
So an adder is a poisonous snake. So when Dan attacked our enemies, it was a vicious and a hard attack. Read on.
That biteth the horse heels.
So like a horse bite, like a serpent will bite the horse's heel, and it will cause the horse to rail up backwards and fall backwards. So Dan was like an attacker, ambusher against our enemies. Read on.
So that his rider shall fall backwards.
So Dan destroyed our enemies, and also too, this is saying Dan caused the nation of Israel to go back into idolatry. When you read the history of Dan.
Okay, so now we're going to go to Deuteronomy 33 and verse 22 to continue on Dan. And of Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's whelp.
So Dan had a characteristic of a lion's whelp too, a courageous, warlike people.
Right, like with Samson, he was one of the main ones.
Of the judge of Israel.
Right. It reads on, he shall leap from Bashan.
Now when it says Dan shall leap from Bashan, Dan was situated in the northern part of Israel. So when it says Dan shall leap from Bashan, meaning Dan was going to leap from where he was occupying and blend into the rest of the tribes of Israel. Because what happened to Dan, when you read in the book of Revelation, it's not mentioning Dan. Why? Because Dan was blended in with the rest of the tribes of Israel.
Right, and to prove that, we're going to go to the New Testament in Revelation chapter 7. Okay, the tribe of Dan, they weren't destroyed as people, but they no longer had an inheritance. Like in the past, when the Levites no longer had an inheritance, so in this day and age, the tribe of Dan no longer has an inheritance. The proof of that is Revelation chapter 7. I'm going to read verses 1 down to 8. I'm going to read it swiftly. If you want to interject, right, do so. It says, And after these things, I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth.
So that's the destruction that's going to come from the 4 corners of the earth, the nuclear destruction that's coming against all nations. Read on.
Nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east,